for coming. My name is Abdullah Bogota, the lead organizer of Melbourne's Silicon Beach. Before I start, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we stand and pay our respects to elders past, present, and emerging. I'd also like to thank the space called me in St Kilda, which has given us space, always gives us this space free of charge, so that we can have these events free of charge. So it's very important. And thank you for coming. We had about 30 or 40 RSVPs, but always Eventbrite and Meetup says it's 50%. So I'm quite happy with the turnout. It's going on video, the very first SiliconTalk. So this is a history-making talk today we are having, because our idea is SiliconTalks will grow to be like TED Talks, only different because we are about ideas and execution of ideas. So I believe that ideas without execution is hallucination. So somebody said that, I found that was on the internet, so I like that. So, because without ideas, startups don't happen. So many of you are new to Silicon Beach. It is a startup community, Australia's second largest startup community, I think, at the moment. It is about bringing people together, startup founders or wannabe founders with tech people, with marketing people, with business people, and people like Rugare who could advise you and guide you on your journey. So join us on, you'd have already joined the meetup if you're here, or if you came through Eventbrite, then join the meetup. I'll send you the link to you through the Eventbrite email that you get. Without further ado, we also have pitch nights and things like that. Come to our pitch night, which is next Thursday night at Royal Melbourne Hotel, a pub in the city. Come and have a look. That's what happens. You might get ideas. Who knows where it will end up. Without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Rugare. You can introduce yourself and take it away.
Wonderful.
Thanks.
Thank you so much, Atula.
No worries.
Well, thank you so much for the privilege to actually have the first SiliconTalk. I'm really, really excited. And the privilege, I don't take this lightly, to be a voice out here in the world. And I'd also like to acknowledge my partner, Brad, is going to hate me for acknowledging this. We are a team together and we create life together, and it's with me in everything that I do. So thank you so much for being here and also giving me the life and expression that I have. So, before we start, I'd love to just hear from some of you why you're here today and what would be great. Like, this is a Thursday night, we could be at home watching Netflix or, but you've chosen to be here tonight. So I'd just like to hear, what had you choose to use your valuable time in this room today? Who'd like to share?
Sure. Networking primarily, and also just practicing the skills around that, people skills, networking skills, etc. That's what it is.
So your name is Daniel,
Yep.
and you're here to practice, meeting people, networking skills tonight.
Yep.
Wonderful, thank you so much for being here. As I share my story, I'm going to share how networking and community has given me the life that I have and helps me fulfill on my purpose today. So thank you for sharing.
Thank you.
Who else would like to share while they're here? Thank you, Amira.
I guess, as I mentioned when I was chatting with you, I come from the legal profession as well, and I'd like to know how you've overcome the, the resistance from the profession, even in the, the community as well, when it comes to an orthodox way of operating your practice. So,
Right.
and also networking as well, and getting to know some great people in Melbourne.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for being here, Amira, and today you're going to get a sense of how you can interrupt what the traditional ways of doing life and business. So in my sharing, you're going to hear some of the things that I have created to interrupt the traditional way people live life. Thank you. Great. And yes, Andrew.
So I'm Andrew. Most reason I came, or at least looked up Silicon Beach, was for networking as well. Looking at different ways to expand my own business and other people's through adding value. But then when I saw Rugare was on there, I hadn't seen you in almost 2 years, so it was an added bonus.
Extraordinary. So, a side story, Andrew and I lived together for a year, and he was actually present when I had my first so-called business failure, which I'll be sharing today. So it's so great that you're here, it's very moving. So
Cool.
thank you.
You're welcome.
Anybody else like to share?
Well, my name is Zach, and I'm here because I like to draw inspirations from other people's stories. I know a little bit about your story so far, and I figured it was one that I couldn't miss.
Great, thank you so much for being here, and thank you for giving me respect, in a way we've never met before, but that you're here inside of what other people have said in the community, that's moving. So thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Great. Yes, Helen.
I'm Helen and I'm a midwife, so I'm here because I met Rugare at another program, and he said he was talking about his life. I lived in Africa as a child, and so I was interested to find out more about your story, really.
Great. So the African connection brought us together. We do personal and professional development. So though, I'm a person that is also, I'll share a bit more about myself that helps other people achieve their dreams. I'm always training myself, Otherwise, my clients will catch up with me. I don't want them to catch up with me. I have to always create the gap. So Helen and I do personal and professional development programs together, which is wonderful. So thank you for being here. Great.
Thank you.
One last person. Yes, David.
I'm here to hear interesting stories about people. We said we're using the expression people from all walks of life.
Yes.
And it sounds like you walked around a lot on this planet, and I'm excited to hear about it.
Great. Thank you so much for being here and being curiously engaged as well. So I hope today is going to be of value. So my intention is to provide lots of value. For me, it's like a conversation, like having a tea conversation with a best friend. So who you are for me are like my best friends having a tea conversation, today. And so ask lots of questions as well. Just going to alter the chair so that I'm more comfortable. Does this get altered, or is this going to be part of the video? So that I do this in style.
Yeah, you can adjust.
Great. So I haven't actually introduced myself. My name is Rugare Gomo. I love saying my name. I was named by my mom and my dad, and my full name means God's peace. I'm originally from Zimbabwe. That's where I grew up, and I came to Australia by myself 18 years ago when I was 16 years old. How people relate to me in the world, people relate to me as a lawyer, as a high-performance coach, and also as a philanthropist. That's how most people relate to me. What I exist for, though, is to empower and enable people to bring their dreams to life and live a wondrous life. So everything that you're going to hear today is inside of the context of my passion that every single human being gets to fulfill on their dreams and live a wondrous life, just like I've had the opportunity to do so. So, I'm going to start by sharing a little bit about my family. So I grew up in Zimbabwe, and I grew up to, you could say, a low middle class family. My mom is a nurse by profession, and my dad was actually trained as a pastor. But what my mom did, by the time I was 8 years old, my mom was one of the first women going into community, educating people about HIV and AIDS. So you can imagine in a traditional society in Zimbabwe, where at that time in the early 90s, 1 in 4 people were HIV positive, that my mom was talking to prostitutes about, HIV and AIDS, talking to men on the truck routes, talking about HIV and AIDS, talking about using condoms, meeting people in the mining communities. My mom is a very powerful woman, that she stood out and used her skills to heal Zimbabwe, and I'm proud of her for that. My dad also used his life to make a difference to people. My dad is passionate about youth leadership programs, so throughout my entire life, he used his life for empowering teenagers to be leaders for themselves in their own life. Through his organization, they had street kid programs, family counseling programs, and youth camps as well. So in our home, it was very common to sometimes have street kids stay with us. It was very common to have families who were close to breaking up coming to see my mom and dad for counseling. It was very common for people who had discovered that they'd been infected by HIV coming to our home because it was a safe home where there was no prejudice. So that's the kind of environment I grew up in essence. Now, my mom and dad never had the opportunity to get an education. So my mom and dad never went to university. So when we were born, so I'm the second of 3 children, my mom made my dad promise that every single child would get an education that they had never had. And my family and my mom and dad have fulfilled on that. My brother, he's 5 years older than me. He lives in New York, and he works at Google and is responsible for all cloud and YouTube globally at Google. He's only 39 years old. My sister, the first female in my entire family to go to university, she's got 3 degrees, and she just started working at Deloitte & Touche. So I am present to the environment my family, my mom and dad created so that we could achieve and thrive in essence. So that just gives you a context of my family. I love my family. I've been here by myself for the past 18 years and we're as close as ever. Distance has not separated us whatsoever. So we've worked on our relationship in essence. So because of my mom and dad's work, we'd sometimes have people from overseas come and stay with us. So we'd have people from New Zealand, Australia, the UK, the US, and we always found the Australians to be very fascinating people. They were like more open to adventure and curious. So when I was young, I was like, one day I'm going to go to Australia. So it was in my head like, I'm going to go to Australia. And for me, it didn't live like a fantasy. It was like, I'm going to make that happen. That's how it lived for me. And so when I was 14 years old, I wrote a letter to a family friend, one of those volunteers who came and stayed with us. And I made a request. I shared a vision of myself and my life. I made a request and I said, I'd love to come to Australia. I'd like to get an education. This is what I want to do with my life. I did not tell my mom and my dad this because I was scared at that time that they would be in my way of actually coming to Australia. So I had a point of view that they may think that me making that request was impolite and inside of the cultural context that we grew up in. But I wasn't going to let cultural impoliteness be in my way of what I wanted. So I wrote my letter. And then Andrew got the letter, but I didn't hear, when he received it, I didn't hear anything back for 3 months. So I was like, oh my God, I've done something wrong. Why isn't there any response? I'm in trouble. Then one day my dad comes home and says, what's this about you going to Australia? And I did my cheeky smile because usually my smile, gets me out of any trouble. That's what in those days, not anymore. I'm an adult now. And he said, what's this about you going to Australia? And said, I wrote a letter to Andrew asking if I could come. And I was like, oh, okay. Well, that sounds like a good idea, And so my journey of coming to Australia started. Now, my family is not wealthy whatsoever. There is no way they could have afforded for my air tickets. There's no way they could have afforded for my school fees, However, Andrew, who lived here in Australia, rose up and went to different schools, explained my family situation, and I got a scholarship, a part scholarship to go and do year 11, year 12. So that's what we call it here in Australia, in Zimbabwe, the UK, and other Anglo-Saxon countries, you call them the A levels in essence. So I did my year 11, year 12 here. Now, Andrew paid for my tickets to come to Australia. Andrew looked after me for over 8 years. Andrew paid the remainder of my school fees as well, which was about $6,000 a year. So you could still say that's a lot of money. Not only did he do that, he was already looking after 4 other boys from troubled families. So he was actually a foster carer. So inside of him running his own small business, Andrew lived to make a difference to other people. And my entire life completely altered inside of that context. Why I share this is because the first thing I wanted to note was that it's all started with a vision. Now, and I came to Australia with $325 US. So I did not know how it is all going to work out in reality. All I knew is that I had to get myself here as my first stage. That's all I knew. And in actual fact, being a 16-year-old boy, you don't know any different. There's nothing to lose. I had nothing to lose. Anyway, it's like I'm an adolescent, good riddance, let me go on my adventure. Anyway, so that's what it was like for me in any case. No, though I spoke English, living in Australia is very different. I never knew how to use a washing machine because we used to wash our clothes by hand. I didn't know how to use a microwave. I didn't know how to, what else did I know how to do? There's so many things. Internet, yeah, dedicated internet. That was amazing. As simple as that. So I had to be trained how to use all those things. So it was coming literally into a whole different world and a different environment for me in Australia, even though I spoke English. Now, one of the things that made a difference is community. So I keep on saying to people that my life is not my own. It took a whole community to get me here. You know, Andrew saying yes, the school saying yes, you know, and then there were many other people along the journey as well, which I'll share about in shortly. So I completed my year 11, year 12, and then it was like, what am I going to do next? You know, it was during the Zimbabwean crisis. So this was in 2002. So I started university in 2003. And I call it the Zimbabwean crisis because it felt like a crisis then, even though things were worse later on the track. So when I grew up, bread used to be $1 when I was a young boy. When I left the country, bread was $30. By the time it was 2008, bread was a few $billion. Zimbabwe had the highest inflation in the world during that period of time. And unfortunately, it's actually going back to that situation right now. So as you can imagine, for me, it was a very stressful time. What is happening in Zimbabwe? The schools in Zimbabwe were closed. There were lots of demonstrations in Zimbabwe. There was very little food. There was no petrol. And so for myself, it's like, there's no way I'm going back to Zimbabwe. If I go back to Zimbabwe, I'm going back to nothing, you know, and I'm going to be a burden to my family in that regard. So I was the first to leave. Like, my entire family was still back in Zimbabwe. You know, to deal with it, I would not read anything to do with Zimbabwe. It was too stressful. Because it's like, if I even watch the news, what if I were to see my family home on fire? Because things like that were actually happening. So I shut it out, in essence. So I was like, okay, what am I going to do? Now, the person you're talking to right now wasn't the person who arrived in Australia. I was quiet. I was shy. I wasn't even comfortable in my own skin. In the context, growing up and being raised in an African country, we are trained that it's a white man's world and you have to work 10 times harder to make it. So we work hard, you know, because that's the context that we were brought up in. And so for myself, by the way, I didn't even know I was gay, just in case nobody knew I'm gay, love it. And didn't when I found out, but I now do. And I had all these limiting beliefs of myself that were in my way inside of trying to fulfill on my vision of getting an education. However, I was more committed to fulfilling the vision than being right about myself. So little shy me would connect with people, would come to networking events like this and talk to people, you know. I started sharing my story of getting an education, and I would, people would then donate money. Then I would enter my bank with no accountability. So this had me think, why are people putting money in my bank account and there's no accountability? How can I show them that I am valuing their contribution to me? So when I was at university, I would take on new activities, like being the social justice officer at law school, participating in Amnesty International. Then I'd have a newsletter to share with people who were being my community of, you know, the things that I was doing and how I was developing myself, which meant that I had to learn to be vulnerable. So one of the things I learned throughout my whole journey was really being vulnerable with people and being willing to say and communicate things exactly the way they are and the way they're not. But that, at that time as a young man, that was really, really hard. But it's something that I've learned to do. And now for me, it's like my partner keeps on telling me to just shut up. Do you have to talk about that thing? But that's an access, for actually connecting with people. If you don't share what you're dealing with, how can anybody contribute and fulfill on that purpose? In reality, you can't. So some of the things that I did at university, when I look back, it was really hard. So I want you to know that, many people say, oh, Rugare, that's amazing. Rugare, that's amazing. Rugare, that's amazing. It did not feel amazing. It was survival. The context was, I'm surviving. I'm here by myself. My mom and dad are in Zimbabwe. Sometimes I don't even know what's happening to them. My first year in Australia, I didn't even talk to them. I only talked to them on the phone for 3 times because I couldn't even afford a phone call. That's, they couldn't send money. The money was worthless. There was nothing. It was me, myself, and I. And the community that I was creating together. So it was hard. So I would feel lonely a lot of the time. I would go go to university, put my best smile on, try and study, but sometimes that was hard. I was exhausted. I worked hard. My first job was at McDonald's. I worked at McDonald's for 4 years. Loved it, by the way. We don't have McDonald's in Zimbabwe, so I thought I was coming to a top restaurant. So, so when I went to my interview, they asked me, why do you want to work at McDonald's? It's like, we don't have McDonald's in Zimbabwe, and we've heard that it's a really top restaurant. I got a job. And I ran it like a top restaurant. In the end, I became the chief manager. But context is decisive. If you don't know any different, you give your all. And I gave my all. I used to get tips at McDonald's. I had my favorite clients. I even had people driving to airports and events through my clients. Now, when I shared that, for me, I didn't know any different. But when I shared that with my friends, they would think that's weird. But I knew no different. I'm green. I'm fresh off the boat, in essence. If that's the expression. So I would work hard. I would work during my school holidays. I would work. I'd be up at 4 a.m. and then I'd do my shift till 2 p.m. Then I'd catch a tram to go into the city and then do my next shift. And then I'd get home and do my cleaning shift. You worked to fulfill on the vision, raising funds to go to university. That was the game. So, many times in class I'd be tired, I'd be exhausted, but I was like, I have to pass, because if you don't pass in Australian immigration, guess what? If you fail 3 times, you're out. So I had to be able to discover performance inside of my circumstances. Now, as I was sharing with you, I kept on discovering how else can I empower myself so that I can fulfill on my game. So even when I was at university, I did an arts and law degree, and I did a double major, arts, French and European studies. Love that. So if anybody's following Brexit, I've been following that for 2 years. It's been emotionally draining. For me, I'm not British, I'm not European, but I love all this stuff. And so I created an internship for myself in France. And this internship, so I went to Monash University, so my university did not actually have a program with this particular institute, and the other institutes were too expensive, so I'm like, I wasn't going to let that in my way, because my name is Rugare Gomo. And so I created and found an institution where I could do French language school for 6 months, where I could go to France, live it without working, and my school fees in Australia would cover all my expenses in France. And then I got the whole French department and the European department to approve it. And so they actually changed the rules for me to be able to do that. So for me, when you're talking about how to do things without the traditional way, I've been doing that from day one. Just because people say you can't doesn't mean you can't do it. You just have to keep on having the conversation and share the vision such that somebody is going to keep on saying yes, or how do we make it work together? And so I was required to bring back all my books for 6 months. I had a suitcase, about 150 kg suitcase of books after 6 months that I had to bring back for them to audit, to actually see that I'd done the work and that I was not as scamming Zimbabwe. No. And so that's one of the things that I created in my 3rd year of university, and I loved it. I had an amazing time in France, and I grew as well because it was in a different culture, a different context again. When I was in France, I love all things EU, and so I was like, I want to have an internship in Brussels. That's my next game. But by the way, I want you to know that I was still a shy person. So I wasn't like this, I would say it in my head, but it wouldn't always come out with ease. So I remember there was a group of my community in France who were going to Strasbourg for this European conference where you had European diplomats there, and I was like, great, this is going to be a great opportunity. Drove all the way to Switzerland, to Strasbourg, and then I networked like a mofo. So I literally went from each person, hi, my name is Rugare, I'm from Australia, I'm doing European studies in French, I've got limited time in Europe, and I love everything to do with Europe, I'm looking for an internship, do you have anything? No, yes, give me an email. Literally. So people kept on saying no, but I was like, okay, that's a no for that person, who's next? Because there's a whole group of people, there's somebody who this could be an opportunity for, and that's what we call performance. A no doesn't mean anything, it's just a no for that. It's not a rejection of me, it's a no because it's not an opportunity that's available to them right now, or they don't see what I'm sharing as an opportunity. Then I remember going back to France, and I was like, okay, time to write this email to this director of Care for Europe so that I can do this internship. Like, oh my God, he's British, but I was in France, does he speak French and English? So all these concerns in my head. So I decided, it took me like 48 hours to write an email in English and French. Because I better make sure I cover my bases. I'm like, oh my God, what if there's a spelling mistake in my email? Maybe that spelling mistake in French is going to have me not get the job. Like all those concerns. It's a very familiar conversation with all of us, isn't it? When we really want something, want to get it perfect and right, Sent the email and then it responded in English. Then I realized it doesn't actually speak my French. So all that fretting for nothing. So, went to Brussels, did an internship for 2 weeks. It was an amazing experience. We'd go to these meetings with European ambassadors as well. It was also during the Tony Blair era as well. So, some people may love Tony Blair, some people may not love Tony Blair. But I wanted to tell you the reality was that Europe loved Tony Blair. He was a celebrity during that period of time before the Iraq War. Just to come in, literally the whole of Europe would stop when Tony Blair came in to town. Your expression there, blank. From Scotland. But that was the context during that period of time. So, when Tony came to town, I'm saying, I know we haven't met first time now, I'm saying as if we're friends. Nope, don't know him. When Tony came to town, the whole of Brussels would stop because he was in town. He was really a leader at that time who was highly respected. And still is today in certain circles, not in all circles anymore. So came back to Australia. So that was part of my journey. Came back to Australia. I had to keep on sharing, what I was discovering, what was opening up for me. People. My biggest sponsor would put $5,000 in my bank account every year, no strings attached. Would get their grandmother to put in money as well. So I'm clear that my life is not my own. You know how people say, oh, I'm a self-made person. That's, I was going to use,
You can see.
okay, that word. It's bullshit. We are so caught up in trying to do things alone. Our access to actually fulfilling on a purpose, is actually bringing people in, like-minded people to fulfill on it. I'm not this person because Rugare did it alone. No, I'm this person because Andrew Gaskell, sponsored me to come to Australia. School gave me a scholarship. Janine taught me how to drive. My friends would take me out for pizza and beer on Friday nights after high school. They educated me. My friends in high school would push me to do performing arts when I used to think that's too scary to do. I kept on being pushed by my community to go beyond who I knew myself to be. You ask at Silicon Beach, at Tula, he's got a whole team of people, and he's created this space to empower us to keep on pushing ourselves as entrepreneurs and business people to keep on going beyond our thoughts and our feelings and fulfill on our purpose. My life is not my own, it's a whole community that has contributed to me to be the man I am today. Simple. fast forward, I completed my arts and law degree. Now, people can be strategic about these things. So doing law at that period of time, so this is what, 2003 to 2008, in Australia was not a very smart thing to do for immigration purposes. Lawyers were not actually on the skilled migration list at that time. So it was actually going to be nearly impossible for me to stay in Australia even after I'd completed my degrees. Now, secondly, Australia, and particularly Melbourne, has the second highest concentration of lawyers after New York in the world. There's so many lawyers.
Yeah, I thought so.
So many lawyers. So even after you finish a law degree, most people don't actually practice law after they finish. Most people don't. They go off and do other things. So here I am, international student from Zimbabwe. I was one of 3 people at Monash University, African students in law school for 6 years. And this is modern Australia, by the way. And law firms have a pick of so many graduates. For who you don't have to pay visa application fees, and it's very, very, very competitive. As a law student, you can't just be a lawyer, you have to be a magnific pianist, you have to have spent 6 months at the UN, you've had to, trek the Himalayas or something, because it's that competitive, and law firms want to know that you're a well-rounded person in that regard. So I'm thinking, okay, what next? How am I going to fulfill my vision? I want to stay in Australia. I love Australia. So I remember, when I started law school, one of my friends at university's father was a partner in a firm. So he was like, he'd heard my story. He said, oh, why don't you come over and do like an internship? Not in that voice, probably in a more masculine voice. But he was like, why don't you come over and do an internship? No idea what that is, because I'm in a different society, different context. So I spent, him and Nick Musgrove, we spent 2 weeks at Maddox Lawyers, which was amazing. And I entered this building, I'm like, oh my God, this is luxury. I've never been in such a building before. And I worked in the mail room, and I also worked in precedence for precedence for a week. So that was document management. And I thought to myself, well, I'm in. I better make myself known, because my game is to stay in Australia. So I asked and made requests again. So shy me was like, how in the world am I going to make requests? Because it's like, if I make a request and they say no, I would still take it as a personal rejection. It's like, maybe there's something wrong with me, I'm not good enough, they're going to find out that I'm gay or that I'm a different type of man. Because I was dealing with all these things about myself that I didn't know I was dealing with at that time. Lots of noise in my head. But I kept on sharing, and then Paula was like, yeah, we've got work. Why didn't you come and work in precedence? So I did, then they ran out of work, and then I went to HR, like, I need work, and I started working in the debt collection department. So for the next 5 years, I literally worked in nearly every single department at Maddox for 5 years throughout my university, while having my Maddox jobs, while cleaning offices as well, late at night. And I'm so grateful for that experience. Now, guess what? My marks were not that good at university. So it's like, in a very highly competitive world, it's like I was dealing with stuff like working, studying, I was tired, so I didn't really have the space for myself to perform, because I had all these concerns. And, it was then in 2008, I was like, how am I even going to get a job? So I remember doing my clerkship there. Now at that stage, I'd gone to visit my brother as well in the UK. When I'd finished my clerkship, and I remember that there was going to be a cocktail party. Maddox was hosting a cocktail party to select the potential graduates. Now, I'd fortunately been able to go to the UK because, again, community. I got somebody put me on their flying benefits I hadn't seen my brother for years. So, I hadn't seen my brother for maybe 5 years. So I went on their frequent flyer benefits. Went to the UK, but the moment I heard they were having a cocktail party, I cut my trip short and flew back to Australia, because I was going to give myself the maximum opportunity to perform so that they experience me in every way. So that was critical for me. Like, playing full out in the vision, and you get what you get. So I remember going to the cocktail. I remember actually being stuck in Hong Kong. They told me in Hong Kong that the flights were full, and I said to them, no. I need to be on that flight. I've got a cocktail party to attend. My life depends on it. And I actually refused to move from the counter. This is how persistent I am. I said, I have to be on the flight. There's a cocktail party to attend. Thank you. And then they kept on looking. And then they said, well, we found a seat on the plane. However, it's in first class and with a broken tray. Is that okay for you, Mr. Gomo? I'm like, yes, thank you! You know, who'd have thought? You know, me, I know! So here I am from Hong Kong back to Melbourne in first class. It's never happened ever again. Ever, so, but I've never played the cocktail card again. So here I am, you know, entering first class, everybody's looking at me, this young black boy in my trackies, because at that time I thought I was going to be in economy, so you in first class at that time, you actually need to dress up, but I didn't have time to dress up. I don't even think I had clothes to dress up in anyway. So, I get back to Melbourne, I attend the cocktail party, and I network like a mofo. I make sure that every single partner in the room knows who I am, make sure that they know that I want the job and that I'm willing to do anything. But my 5-year history of working at Maddox also indicated my performance. Though my marks were not like H1 or whatever you call it, A+.
PhD.
Thank you very much. That's how interested I was in my marks. But my performance of my capability of performing the work was stellar. You know, and they offered me a graduate position, and during that time as well, 6 months before I graduated, the Australian government changed the immigration laws, and they introduced the 485 visa, which allowed me to stay for 2 years and work and live. How crazy is that? But I did not take actions based on the circumstances. I was still playing my vision. I could never see that the Australian government was going to change the laws. I could never foresee that Maddox would take in an international student being willing to do that. Because if I listened to all the other international students, they never bothered to apply. Because they didn't bother because there was a conversation called for international students, so we're not going to get a job. But I did. So I'm communicating that because don't listen to all the noise that's around you. People are going to say what people are going to say. But guess what? You're unique. You have no idea what your talents are. You don't know what a person is going to get connected to. So give it a go and play full out. Then you can discover at least who you truly, truly are in that regard. Pause. I need to have a glass of water.